You remember also the parable of the vineyard workers? The 3 stages there. He sends messengers, they reject them. So He sends more messengers, and they reject them. And then He says, last of all, I'm going to send what? I'm going to send my Son. And what did they do? They rejected Him as well. And then Jesus, after He tells this parable, we find Jesus saying, the kingdom will be taken from you and given to a nation that produces the fruits thereof. Who is that nation that produces the fruits thereof? It'll become absolutely clear, if it isn't already, tomorrow when we deal with the second part of the 70 weeks, that it has to do with the preaching of the gospel in the Gentile world. And then you notice that after He gives the parable of the vineyard workers, He pronounces the woes on the scribes and the Pharisees, and He says, fill up the cup. The cup is full. But as we notice, Jesus said, I'm still going to send you wise men, and I'm still going to send you prophets. Because the 70 weeks don't end when Jesus is rejected. They end 3.5 years later. Are you with me or not? So there's still 3.5 years of grace for the Hebrew nation, even after this. And then Jesus, after He pronounces the woes on the scribes and the Pharisees, in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 38, He departs the temple. The Shekinah is departing the temple, and He says, your house is left unto you what? Is that a word that's used in Daniel chapter 9? Absolutely. Your house is left unto you desolate. In other words, the Shekinah has abandoned the temple. And now where does Jesus go to sit? Just like in the first destruction. He goes to sit on the Mount of Olives. And what does He begin talking about? He begins talking about the destruction of what? Of Jerusalem. Because of the rejection of the Messiah. Are you following me or not? Is this prophecy talking about some future Antichrist after the rapture? Listen carefully to what the Christian world has done. First of all, they have absolved the Jewish nation from the guilt of the death of the Messiah. And how have they done that? They have done that by projecting this prophecy to a future Antichrist after the rapture. So the Jewish nation has nothing to do with the fulfillment of the rejection of the Messiah. The second thing that they have done is by saying that the prophecy of the little horn applies to the future Antichrist, they have absolved the Roman Catholic Church from the guilt of killing the body of Jesus Christ, His church. And so basically by directing these prophecies to the future, they have lost sight of the guilt of the Jewish nation as a nation and the guilt of the Roman Catholic papacy in persecuting the saints of the Most High because they're projecting these things to the future and they do not see how these things have been fulfilled in the past. Notice how Ellen White described the destruction of Jerusalem, the reason, in Great Controversy, page 35. The Jews had forged their own fetters. What have the Jews done? They had forged their own fetters. They had filled for themselves the cup of vengeance. In the utter destruction that befell them as a nation, and in all the woes that followed them in their dispersion, they were but reaping the harvest which their own hands had sown. Who destroyed Jerusalem? They did, by rejecting the Messiah. Says the prophet. Now she quotes that verse. It's found in Hosea 13, verse 9. Says the prophet, O Israel, thou hast destroyed thyself, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. Their sufferings, now listen carefully, their sufferings are often represented as a punishment visited upon them by the direct decree of God. It is thus that the great deceiver seeks to conceal his own work. By stubborn rejection of divine love and mercy, listen carefully, the Jews had caused the protection of God to be withdrawn from them, and Satan was permitted to rule them according to his will.